Hello all and welcome to our third and final video regarding VBScript. Today we are going to look at working with the file system and working with file folders. This can be helpful with some basic Windows administration if you're trying to install things in batch using some of these scripts. Let's get started. Working with the file system, just like anything else that we've done, there are a couple steps that we're going to look at when looking at the file system. So we're going to talk about connecting scripts to the file system so that it can read files and folders. And using a file system object, just like we did before, we can create, copy, move, delete, and also look at some properties of both files and folders that are on any networked machine. We are going to use the file system object in order to create a connection to what we're looking for. So we're going to use that create object command that we've used before, and we are going to say scripting file system object. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to define the folder that we're going to search, and we're going to use the command called get folder. So here on the next one, we've got get folder and we set it a path. We're going to use a command that is files with the capital F to get a listing of all of the files located within that folder. Once we have that list, we're going to use a for each loop and walk through each file in the folder. So here, for example, each file within my set, I'm going to print out the name, how big it is, when it was created, and the last date it was modified. So once you get this object file, there's a lot of different attributes and things that we can see about that file. Some things are called properties, some are called attributes. So there are properties such as date created, last accessed, modified, where it is, the name, and who it belongs to. Now, an attribute is technically a property, but an attribute is going to be things regarding the file that are for information, such as, is it a read-only file? Is it hidden? Things about the file that most likely won't change. I can do things like object file dot, and I can use any of these properties and get that value for each file. Some additional file properties that we can get are the full path of where the file is located, a shorter version of the name or a shorter version of the path. We can also see the size of the file in bytes. And then lastly, we can see the type of the file. So whatever the registry of that specific computer associates to that file. So for example, if my .doc files are linked to Microsoft Word in my registry, that's what will be given. Now, attributes, on the other hand, are going to give information about how an operating system can use a file. So, like I said before, is it read-only? Is it hidden? Is it a system file? What is it? Here I've got some attributes and I've got a bit mask value. And that bit mask value is what is going to be retrieved when we use the command. So if it is a normal file, it's going to be a 0, which means there are no attributes. Read only, hidden, system, archive, alias, compressed. We've got different bit mask values. In order to get the file attributes, I want to create the file system object, and then I want to use the get file to bind the file, and then use the attribute method. And remember, this is going to return the bit mask value, so you are going to then have to interpret what that means. So for my attribute file, or attribute property for my files, ooh, lots of words. So here I've got a series of if statements that are going to determine what type of file it is. So I'm going to here, I'm going to get what the mask is by up here, get file, the bitmap number, object attribute. Once I get that attribute bit mask value, I'm then going to determine is it a 0, 1, 2, 4, etc. Based on that number, I am going to give it a string to put into the echo. Okay, so again, you're going to get that bit mask value and you have to interpret what that means and how to use it. We can set file attributes. So in order to do that, we say the object file dot attribute equals, and we give it a number. And again, we're using those bit mask values. So I can say object file dot attribute equals 4, and then it is going to change that attribute into being a system file because I used bit mask value 4. I can create files by using a create object. And again, we're all working within that file system object. I can say create an object, and there's my file system object, and then I can do create text file. In that create text file, I want to send it a full path and name of whatever file I'm trying to create. If you don't send it a full path, it will put it wherever it thinks its local is. So it's always a good practice to put in that full path so you know exactly where it's putting it. We can also write to a text file. Again, file system object. We use the appropriate parameter to indicate whether we are going to overwrite or append. So we've got 3 different ways we can do it through methods. We can do a write, which is going to write to the file without appending the carriage return. So remember, this is going to just basically put it at the end and leave the marker at the end of the file. The write line, on the other hand, is going to put that carriage return and line feed at the end of the file. So it's going to take you to a new line. And then write blank lines, we can put some blank lines to the file where we can actually indicate, like, write me 4 blank lines by changing that n to a 4. If we're going to write to a file, we need to make sure that that file already exists. In order to do that, we actually have a file exists. So if object file exists, and here is my file name, then I can go ahead and open it and write to it. If it doesn't exist, I want to create it. It's not going to do it automatically. We have to program it to do it in that way. Folders, on the other hand, are very, very similar to how we did files. So instead of saying create file, we're going to create folder. When we create folder here, we are going to put a path, we're going to put a prefix, and here we're just putting a number. So here we're creating a set of folders with folder 1, folder 2, folder 3. We can also delete a folder by using delete folder and sending it the entire path. Here at the bottom, this is deleting a set of folders, just like we did with the create. So creating folders and deleting folders, this is a good way to put space on a local machine if you're trying to do some installations or if you want to do some debugging. But make sure if anything you put there, you clean up yourself. Just like with the files, we have to bind to the folders, and that's going to be able to relay information about the properties or attributes of the folder to the script. So again, before connecting to the objects, we have to bind them with using our get folder. We create that object, file system object. We get the folder, get folder, and then we bind it by saying sending it the path of the folder. So in order to do that, we do use that additional set keyword. Just like with the files, we need to make sure folders exist. We don't want to delete something that doesn't exist or add a file to something that doesn't exist. So we are going to get an error if we try to bind to something that's not there. So a good practice, let's make sure that it exists before binding, just like we made sure a file existed before we wrote to it. Here, if the folder exists, then go ahead and do what we need to do and bind to it. Otherwise, say it doesn't exist and we are going to create it and then create the folder. This whole idea of checking to see if it exists and then creating it if it does not is really good practice to keep your script moving forward without actually having any kind of user interaction. Last but not least, we can copy folders and move folders. We use a copy folder command and a move folder. So for a copy folder, what we're going to send it is we are going to send it the source and then the destination. When we move it, we do the same thing. This is where it is. This is where I want to put it. So that really is a quick and easy way to work with files and folders when working Windows administration and VBScript.